Okay, plan for tonight is lots of starting. We're just going to do a whole bunch of starting sequences and have a go at practicing and trying to improve our starts, making sure we're on the line with speed when the start gun goes, and also having a bit of a look at what tactics we should be thinking about there. Please do come back to the wardroom afterwards for another debrief. We'll be having a chat about a few extra race rules, as well as trying to get race cues up on the screen so we can look at a few of the starts and look at how people did. Last week we had 4 boats with it working: 88 Proof, Sasquatch, After Midnight and Saucy. So the others of you, if you can try your hardest to get it working, it is going to be used during the regatta as well. It's going to be a massive help to you understanding how you are starting. We will set up the start line accurately, so you'll be able to see exactly how far off the line you were. We'll be communicating on VHF 62. Again, if you want to chat to another boat, have a chat on channel 6 or 8, or have a chat on a cell phone. So exercise, we're going to have 2 marks as our start line. Kaniwi will be floating somewhere off looking down the line. She won't be anchored, but yeah. So start line is between those 2 marks, heading a short distance to an upwind mark. Want you to race pretty hard for that upwind mark, so that we can figure out what happens in the last few minutes after the start. So you know not only where you were when you went off the line, but whether you actually had a good position, whether you're having clear air or not. We'll get the first few boats around that top mark, and then once they're around, everyone else, if you know kind of where you're going to end up, can start turning around and heading back, and we'll do another start. Start sequence is going to be standard start sequence, so 5 minutes, class flag up, 4 minutes, our prep flag up, 1 minute, prep flag down, and at the start the class flag will come down. You'll see what the class flag is when we see what flags we can find. We will also be nice and cool times to start over VHF, so keep an ear out for that, but we will try our best to use the flag so those unfamiliar with them can become a little bit more familiar. It is possible, depending on resources, that we may just be calling times over VHF, but we'll try our best to use the flags. Okay, how do we get a good start? First of all is knowing where the start is, knowing when the start is, so knowing what time we have to go on the start. If we don't know the time, it's going to be very hard for us to get a good start. Next one is know where the start line is, and we're talking about not just a general area so that you're in a harbour, but talking about precisely where that line is. We also need to have a plan as to where we're going to start, and we're going to try and stick to it. So we'll talk about some of our considerations for that shortly. So how do we know when the start is? First of all is understand the start sequence. If you don't understand it, have a bit of a look around online, or hopefully as we use it a few times you'll start to become a little bit more familiar with it. Personally, I like to start the countdown timer at 5 minutes, and then don't always get it particularly precise. Might be 5 or 10 seconds off because you're a little bit late to hit the button, or you're a distance away and you've only heard the sound and haven't seen the flag go up. So I like to try and sync it at 4 minutes and get it nice and precise. You do need a device where you can start at 5 minutes and be able to sync at 4 minutes. So if you don't have one of those, then thinking about some of the apps, which we'll talk about shortly, would be good. Also thinking about how you're communicating the start time on your boat. Do you have a big visible timer, or is someone calling it out, or is it just on someone's watch? Thinking about making sure that people on the boat who need to have that information do have that information, and thinking about how often we communicate it is really good to talk about as well. Right, how do we know where the start is? This is really important. It's pretty well impossible to tell with any accuracy where the middle of the start line is if you haven't set up beforehand. Almost every start line you look at in a photo will have a big dip in the middle of it. So if you can figure out where it is more precisely than other people are, then you have a big advantage over those people. If they think the line's a few boat lengths back from where it actually is, you can be on the line and you're already a few boat lengths ahead, and as we'll see shortly, getting a good start ahead means that you're going to not have to worry about issues of getting bad air off the start. How can we know where the start line is? The old way is by using a transit, so that is where we're lining up the 2 marks of the start line, and then looking for a visible thing on the hill or something we can line up with. We can do that both directions, and often we've got people on the bow. What I now personally prefer is to use an instrument using GPS. So we have specific devices like the ProStart, which are really good, or you can just use a smartphone, and there are various apps out there. To do this, you need to ping the ends of the line before the start. So you do need to set up your device so that you know where the start line is. So make sure you're aware of that. In the email I send with this, I will send a couple of links for you to try out. They aren't apps that I've tried myself. I've generally been using a ProStart, so other people who are using apps may be able to contribute to that as well. The other thing we'll do to try and help you is if we move the start line at all, move any of the start marks, we will tell you so that you'll know that you need to re-ping those lines, and we'll generally give you a little bit longer to figure that out. Okay, what are we trying to think about when we're making a plan for the start? We're trying to think about what end we want to start at, making sure we've got some room to accelerate and hit the line at speed, and make sure that we have clear air so that we're not getting bad air off the start line. So figuring out which end we want to look at, there's a few different factors. The major one which everyone always thinks about is line bias, and it is quite important if we have a quite biased line. If we've just got a few degrees of bias, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. If we've got 10 or 20 or 30 degrees of bias, then we might find that one end is particularly advantageous compared to the other one. So we can figure this out by stopping the boat head to wind, putting the bow into the wind, and looking at which end the bow or the wind X on your boat looks at. Don't want to do it sailing along because your apparent wind is going to interfere with that and give you a kind of skewed result. On many boats, on many start boats, there is a wind indicator, so you can use that too to just sail past and have a look, and it'll give you a reasonably good indication of which end of the line is biased or favoured. Bias isn't our only consideration when we're trying to pick an end though. So we need to figure out which side of the course we want to be on as well. So if we think that the right of the course or the starboard side of the course is favoured, then even if we have a bit of port end bias, we might still decide to start at the starboard end of the line. Because if we start the port end of the line, for us to get back across the starboard, we're probably going to end up ducking a whole bunch of boats. Starting at the starboard end, as I mentioned, does give you the ability to tack out and clear your air, generally easier than starting at the port end of the line. Having said that, if we've got a very biased line and you start at the port end and you get a good start, then often you can cross the whole fleet, and that's a really good place to be, obviously, as well. Alright, making sure we've got some room to accelerate. Don't worry about the boats to windward of you. You have rights over them, they have to keep clear. The key is keeping room to leeward of you. So if you've got some room to leeward, then you've got the option to bear away, accelerate your boat, and hit the line with some speed. If you don't have that room to leeward, you're going to find it really hard to build speed as you're coming into the line. The other thing we want to be thinking about is having clear air, and it's got similar requirements and room to accelerate, in that having room to leeward is still really helpful to have clear air. So if you've got room to leeward, even if you've got someone else to windward who's managed to get away a bit quicker or a bit further and they're starting to roll over the top of you, you can just bear away a little bit, just sail in a low mode, sail in a fast mode, and that will hopefully mean that you can keep your air clear. If you've got someone else down to leeward and you can't sail in low mode, then that's not an option and you're going to get rolled. If you do have someone to leeward of you and they get way ahead of you, you're almost certainly going to get lee bowed or gassed off and drop in behind them. So at that point, if it's looking like that's happening, thinking about whether you can tack out, whether you've got that ability, is probably a good thing to start thinking about. In terms of strategy, if you are in a division where you are one of the slower boats, then you do need to have a think about whether you're always going to get rolled. So sometimes you'll be in a division where a number of the boats are quite a lot faster off the line than you are, and if they're always going to roll you, then making sure you've got that ability to tack to clear your air is probably a good consideration in your starting strategy. Quick one on rules for the start. We'll talk a little bit more about starting procedures and some of the different options that race officers have in the debrief, but for the moment I want to remind you that there is no mark room at the start. So the yellow boat in this situation does not have rights to go in behind the committee boat there. The blue boat is perfectly entitled to carry on with its course. We'll be just using a mark, but if you have a committee boat there, do be careful with this. If you try and get in there and you don't have rights, it can get you in a position where it's very hard to get out, and you may end up getting very close or even hitting the committee boat, which is a bad look all round. So just keep that in mind. Right, final couple of things. Warning signal is at 6:15 p.m. First one, we're going to run through as many as we can. Starts are likely to be in the inner harbour right off Clyde Quay, unless it's particularly shifty or light in here. I want people to go pretty hard on these starts, just don't hit anyone is the main thing. So it doesn't matter if you're over the line a couple of times, do please come back and restart, so it's good to train for being over the line too. But I do want everyone to be pushing and trying to be close to that line. I will give a little bit of feedback after each start on VHF too. Make sure you have a plan for your starts, and that you know what the time is and where the line is every time you're starting. If you're finding that it's all getting too much and you don't have enough time to get your plan, or you don't know where the line is, you don't know what the time is, feel free to sit out a start, get everything sorted out, and then come back and do your next start and make sure it's a good one. We don't want to rush through that process, because it's something that I really want you guys to focus on, making sure you have every time before you start races for real. When you're coming back downwind, make sure you have a chat with your crew and debrief your start each time. So thinking about whether you got a good start, whether you're going fast, whether you had clear air, whether you're at the favoured end of the line, how your communication was really good to talk about. And good communication is pretty key to getting a good start. So making sure that everyone knows what's going on, knows whether we're kind of trying to speed the boat up or slow it down, knowing how far it is to the start line, knowing what other boats are doing. Some of the boats will have someone on board taking some video. We're doing this because we want you to be able to look back at how you communicate during that pre-start. So I want you to really be able to tie in together and look at what was a good start, what you were talking about. Starts which don't go so well, look back and say, hey, I wish that someone had said that we've got a boat coming in behind us and it's going to come into leeward and it's going to make our lives hard. So thinking about what communication you've got and being able to look back on that is what we're really focusing on. So looking forward to seeing you guys out on the water on Wednesday. Any questions, just flick me a email or give me a call.